The laughter hit him before the rocks did. Captain Samuel Graves stood on the worn planks of Portland Harbor, Maine, his weathered hands gripping a coil of rope that had seen more storms than most men saw in a lifetime. Around him, young sailors, boys really, with their pressed uniforms and polished boots, pointed and whispered. One of them, a lieutenant with a face too smooth to have known real wind, smirked openly. "That's him?" the lieutenant said, loud enough for Samuel to hear. "That's the legendary fisherman they want us to follow?" Samuel didn't turn. He'd heard worse. He'd lived worse. The harbor smelled of salt, diesel, and fresh paint from the naval destroyers docked in neat rows like obedient children. Everything here was clean, organized. Nothing like the water Samuel knew, the black swells off the Georges Bank where the ocean didn't care about your rank or your medals. Out there, the sea took what it wanted. "Sir," a voice cut through the mockery. Samuel turned slowly. A man in his 50s, barrel-chested and stone-faced, approached. Commander William Ashford. Navy insignia gleamed on his shoulders, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen men die. "Commander," Samuel said, his voice like gravel scraped across wood. "We need to talk." "Don't need to talk. Need to fish." Ashford's jaw tightened. "This isn't about fishing, Graves. This is about survival." Samuel finally looked at him fully. The commander's uniform was spotless, but there was something in his posture. A slight bend in the shoulders, a tightness around the mouth. Fear, buried deep, but there. "Whose survival?" Samuel asked. "Ours. Theirs. Everyone's." Ashford glanced toward the open Atlantic beyond the harbor. 3 of our submarines went dark in the last 2 weeks. No distress signals. No wreckage. Just gone. Samuel said nothing. "The Navy's been searching," Ashford continued. "Sonar, satellites, every piece of technology we've got. Nothing. It's like they vanished into thin air." He paused. "Or into water no one else knows how to read." The younger sailors were still watching, still whispering. Samuel could feel their judgment like barnacles on his skin. He was 72 years old. His boat, the Mary Catherine, was older than most of their fathers. His clothes smelled like bait and rust. To them, he was a relic, a joke. But Ashford wasn't joking. "Why me?" Samuel asked. "Because you've sailed waters that don't exist on any map," Ashford said quietly. "Because fishermen in 6 ports from here to Newfoundland say you can read the ocean like it's written in your blood. Because 3 months ago you pulled a crew of 12 out of a storm that our meteorologist didn't even see coming." Samuel remembered that storm. The Judith Ann, a trawler, caught in a squall that came from nowhere. He'd found them by instinct. No radar, no instruments. Just the way the waves moved, the way the wind tasted. "And because," Ashford added, his voice dropping, "you're the only man alive who's been to the graveyard." The world seemed to narrow. The graveyard. Samuel hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 30 years. It wasn't on any chart. The Navy didn't acknowledge it. But every fisherman who worked the North Atlantic knew. It was a stretch of water northeast of the Georges Bank, where the ocean floor dropped away into darkness so deep that even the fish avoided it. Compasses spun. Electronics failed. Ships that went in didn't always come out. Samuel had been there once, 28 years old, arrogant, chasing a school of bluefin that should have been closer to shore. He'd lost 2 days in that water. When he finally found his way out, his crew wouldn't speak to him for a week. One of them never went to sea again. "You think your submarines are in the graveyard?" Samuel said. "I think," Ashford replied, "that if they are, you're the only chance those men have." Behind them, the lieutenant laughed again. "You can't be serious, Commander. Him. He's got one eye half blind and a boat held together with duct tape. We've got state-of-the-art—" "Shut your mouth, Lieutenant," Ashford snapped, his voice like a whip crack. The younger man flinched. "State-of-the-art is what got us into this mess. Our technology is useless out there. Our training is useless. We need someone who knows the ocean the way it actually is, not the way we want it to be." Samuel studied Ashford's face. There was desperation there, not just for the submarines, for something deeper. The Navy had failed, and they knew it. Now they were turning to the very people they'd spent decades ignoring. The fishermen, the old salts, the men who worked the water not with machines, but with memory and bone-deep knowledge. "How many men on those subs?" Samuel asked. 43 per vessel, 129 total, 129 lives. Sons, fathers, brothers. Samuel looked out at the Atlantic. The water today was calm, almost gentle, but he knew better. The ocean was never gentle. It only pretended to be. "I'll need my own crew," Samuel said. "Not yours. Mine. Done." And you don't give me orders. Out there, I'm captain, not you. Ashford hesitated. In his world, chain of command was everything, but he nodded. Agreed. When do we leave? Dawn. Tomorrow. The lieutenant stepped forward, his face red. This is insane. We're trusting the lives of over 100 sailors to some what? Samuel turned to face him fully. The young man's words died in his throat. Some old fool? Some washed-up fisherman who doesn't know a thing about modern warfare? The lieutenant said nothing. You're right, Samuel continued. I don't know a damn thing about modern warfare, but I know the sea. And the sea doesn't care about your sonar or your satellites. It only cares if you respect it, or if you think you're smarter than it. He stepped closer. The lieutenant, for all his youth and training, took a step back. Those men are alive, Samuel said quietly. I don't know how, I don't know why, but they're alive. And if you want them to stay that way, you'll stop laughing and start praying I'm half as good as the stories say. Silence settled over the dock. Ashford extended his hand. Thank you, Captain Graves. Samuel shook it. The commander's grip was firm, but Samuel could feel the tremor beneath it. Fear, hope, both. As Samuel turned to leave, the young sailors parted like water before a hull. None of them were laughing now, but Samuel wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about the graveyard, about the way the water there moved like something alive, about the cold that sank into your bones and the silence that pressed against your eardrums until you wanted to scream. He was thinking about the 129 men who were somewhere in that darkness waiting, and he was thinking about the one thing he'd never told anyone about his trip to the graveyard all those years ago. He hadn't found his way out. Something had let him out. The Mary Catherine creaked like an old woman's bones as Samuel inspected her in the pre-dawn darkness. His hands moved over the railings, the winches, the nets bundled against the stern. 43 years he'd owned this boat. 43 years of cod, haddock, and halibut. 43 years of knowing exactly how she'd respond to every wave, every wind. Now he was taking her into hell. She won't make it. Samuel turned. A man stood at the edge of the dock, tall, broad-shouldered, with gray streaking through his black beard. Marcus Webb, Samuel's first mate for 20 years before he'd retired to open a bait shop in Kennebunkport. Marcus, Samuel said, what are you doing here? Heard you were sailing into the graveyard. Marcus stepped onto the boat, his boots landing with the confident weight of a man who knew every inch of these decks. Figured you'd need someone to keep you from getting killed. You retired. I got bored. Marcus ran his hand along the gunwale, his expression softening. Besides, Mary would have wanted me to watch your stubborn ass. Mary, Samuel's wife. Gone 3 years now, but her presence still lived in every corner of this boat. She'd named it after herself with a laugh. Said if Samuel was going to spend more time at sea than home, she might as well come along in spirit. She would have told us both we're fools, Samuel said quietly. Probably. Marcus pulled out a thermos and poured 2 cups of coffee. But she married you anyway, so her judgment was always questionable. Despite everything, Samuel smiled. It didn't last long. The sound of boots on the dock made them both turn. Commander Ashford approached, followed by a young woman in naval uniform. She couldn't have been more than 30, with dark hair pulled back severely and eyes that moved constantly, assessing everything. Captain Graves, Ashford said. This is Lieutenant Emily Cross, Naval Intelligence. She'll be accompanying you. Samuel's expression hardened. No, Captain. I said no Navy personnel. My crew. My rules. Lieutenant Cross isn't here to give orders, Ashford said carefully. She's here because she knows things you don't. About the submarines. About the equipment they were carrying. He paused. About what they might have found. Samuel studied the woman. She met his gaze without flinching. There was something in her eyes. Not arrogance, but certainty. The kind that came from knowledge, not assumption. What they might have found? Samuel repeated. You said they disappeared. Ashford glanced at Lieutenant Cross. She stepped forward, her voice crisp and professional. 2 days before the first submarine went dark, they transmitted a coded message. It was fragmentary, but we decoded part of it. She pulled out a waterproof tablet, tapped it, and showed Samuel the screen. The words were stark against the black background. Anomaly confirmed. Depth readings impossible. Magnetic interference severe. Something down here. Request immediate. The message ended there. Something down here, Marcus repeated, reading over Samuel's shoulder. That's not ominous at all. The other 2 submarines were sent to investigate, Cross continued. Same result. Communication for approximately 6 hours, then silence. She looked at Samuel. The last transmission from the third vessel said one word, ascending, then nothing. Samuel felt something cold settle in his chest. Ascending. From the graveyard's depths, submarines didn't ascend. The pressure, the magnetic anomalies, the way the currents moved, it was like trying to climb out of a whirlpool. "You're not telling me everything," Samuel said. Ashford and Cross exchanged a look. 6 months ago, Cross said slowly, a fishing vessel, the Northern Star out of Gloucester, reported something strange. They were trolling near the edge of what fishermen call the graveyard when their instruments went haywire. When they finally got their bearings and headed back, they'd lost 18 hours. The entire crew has the same gap in their memory. "Drugs," Marcus said. "Gas leak. Carbon monoxide. We tested for everything," Cross replied. "Nothing. But the hull of their boat." She swiped the tablet, showing a photograph. The metal hull of the Northern Star showed strange markings. Not scratches, but indentations, perfectly uniform, running in parallel lines along the keel. Naval engineers analyzed them. The pressure required to make those marks would have crushed the boat entirely. Samuel stared at the image. His mind was already working, already fitting pieces together that didn't want to fit. "You think something's down there," he said. "Not just an anomaly, something physical." "I think," Cross said carefully, "that 129 men are missing, and conventional search methods have failed completely. I think you know those waters better than anyone alive. And I think whatever's down there, it's not going to show up on our instruments." Samuel looked at Marcus. His old friend's face was grim, but he nodded slightly. They'd both heard the stories over the years, whispers in ports, legends passed between fishermen, things seen in the deep water, shadows that moved wrong, sounds that shouldn't exist. Samuel had always dismissed them as the sea playing tricks on tired minds, but he remembered his own trip to the graveyard, the way the water had felt aware, the way his compass had spun not randomly, but in patterns, the way, just before he'd found his way out, he'd seen something in the deep water below his boat, a shape too large to be a whale, too deliberate to be a current. He'd never told anyone, not even Mary. "If she comes," Samuel said, pointing at Cross, "she follows my orders. No arguments, no Navy protocols. Out there, I don't care about your rank or your intelligence briefings. You do what I say when I say it, or you're a liability." Cross straightened. "Understood, Captain. And if things go wrong," Samuel added, his voice dropping, "if we find those men and they're not right, you follow my lead, no matter what that means." The implication hung in the air. Ashford's face paled slightly, but Cross didn't flinch. "Understood," she repeated. Samuel turned back to his boat. The sun was starting to rise, painting the harbor in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, deceptive. The ocean always looked most peaceful just before it tried to kill you. "We leave in an hour," he said. "Marcus, check the emergency supplies. Cross, stow your equipment below. Nothing electronic unless it's hardened against magnetic interference." They moved to obey. Ashford lingered. "Captain Graves," he said quietly, "bring them home." "I'll bring home whoever's still themselves," Samuel replied. Ashford frowned. What does that mean? But Samuel was already walking toward the wheelhouse, his mind focused on the journey ahead, on the cold water and the deeper cold beneath it, on the 129 men who'd gone down into darkness and the thing, whatever it was, that might be keeping them there. Behind him, the harbor slowly woke. Seagulls called, engines coughed to life. Normal sounds, normal morning. But Samuel knew better. The graveyard was waiting, and this time, whatever lived in those depths might not let anyone out at all. If this story is pulling you in, leave a comment telling me from which city or country you're watching. I want to know where in the world this journey is reaching. The Mary Catherine cut through the Atlantic swells with the steady rhythm Samuel had known his entire life. 3 hours out of Portland, the water had turned from coastal green to the deep indigo that marked truly open ocean. Behind them, the main coastline had dissolved into a gray line on the horizon. Ahead, there was only water and sky, and somewhere beyond that, the graveyard. Samuel stood at the wheel, his weathered hands resting lightly on the worn wood. He could feel the boat's pulse through his fingertips, the engine's vibration, the hull's flex against the waves, the subtle shifts that told him wind direction and current strength without needing instruments. Marcus emerged from below deck, wiping his hands on a rag. "All supplies secured. We've got enough fuel for 8 days, food for 10 if we ration. Emergency beacons charged, though I doubt it'll do much good where we're going." "It won't," Samuel said simply. Lieutenant Cross stood near the stern, her tablet in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. She'd been quiet since they left port, professional and distant. Samuel had seen that look before. People who trusted technology more than instinct. Out here, that trust could kill you. "Lieutenant," Samuel called. "Put that away." She looked up, confused. "I'm monitoring the last known coordinates of the submarines. If we can establish a search pattern." "Won't matter," Samuel interrupted. "The graveyard doesn't work like normal water. Your coordinates will be meaningless once we cross the threshold." "The threshold?" Cross stepped closer, securing her tablet against her vest. "What threshold?" Samuel pointed ahead. To her, it probably looked like empty ocean, but Samuel could see it. A subtle change in the water's texture, a shift in how the light played across the swells. It was like looking at a curtain that was the same color as the wall behind it. You couldn't see it directly, but you knew it was there. "There's a boundary," Marcus explained, moving to stand beside Samuel. "The old-timers called it the edge. You can't see it on any chart, can't measure it with instruments, but every fisherman who works these waters knows where it is." "That's impossible," Cross said. "Ocean boundaries are defined by temperature gradients, current patterns, geological features. This one's defined by something else," Samuel said quietly. He watched the water ahead. The swells were getting longer, slower. The wind hadn't changed, but the waves were moving differently now, like they were responding to a rhythm that had nothing to do with weather. Cross was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What happened when you crossed it before?" Samuel's jaw tightened. He'd known this question would come eventually. "Time stopped making sense," he said. "We went in at dawn. When we came out, it was dawn again, but 3 days had passed according to the calendar. My compass spun backward. The radio picked up voices speaking languages I didn't recognize. And the water," he paused. "The water moved like something was breathing beneath it." "You're saying the ocean was alive," Cross said, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm saying the ocean there is different," Samuel corrected. "Whether it's alive or just obeying rules we don't understand, I can't tell you. But I can tell you this. Submarines don't disappear from normal water. Men don't lose days of their lives in normal water. And hulls don't get marked by pressure that should have destroyed them in normal water." Cross absorbed this. To her credit, she didn't dismiss it. "If what you're saying is true, how do we navigate it?" "We don't navigate," Marcus said. "We feel our way through, like walking in complete darkness. You go slow, you pay attention, and you trust your instincts more than your eyes. And if our instincts are wrong, then we don't come back," Samuel said flatly. The boat rocked slightly as a larger swell passed beneath them. Samuel adjusted the wheel automatically, his body responding before his mind registered the need. 43 years of muscle memory, 43 years of conversations with this boat, this water. "We're close," he said. Cross looked around. "How can you tell?" "The birds." She followed his gaze upward. For the past hour, seagulls had followed them, as they always did, hoping for scraps or chasing the small fish stirred up by the boat's wake. Now the sky was empty. Every single bird had turned back. "They know," Marcus said softly. "Animals always know." The wind died suddenly, not gradually. One moment there was a steady breeze, the next, nothing. The sails they'd raised an hour ago went slack. The ocean around them became unnaturally still, like glass. Samuel cut the engine. "Why are we stopping?" Cross asked, tension creeping into her voice. "We're not stopping," Samuel said. "We're waiting." "For what?" "For permission." Cross stared at him like he'd lost his mind, but Marcus nodded, his face grim. He'd been here before too, years ago, on Samuel's crew. He remembered. The silence was absolute. No wind, no waves, no engine noise, just the gentle creak of the Mary Catherine's hull and the sound of their own breathing. Then, something changed. The water around them began to move, not with wind or current, but with purpose. Ripples spread outward from a point directly ahead, perfect concentric circles as if something massive had just surfaced and submerged again. But nothing broke the surface. Cross's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. "What the hell was that?" "Easy," Samuel said. "Don't make any sudden moves. Don't show fear. You're talking about it like it's an animal." "Maybe it is," Samuel replied. "Maybe it's something else, but I learned last time it's watching, it's deciding whether to let us through." Another ripple, closer this time. Then another. They were forming a pattern around the boat, a circle that was slowly tightening. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Samuel, I see it." The water directly beneath them had changed color. Not darker, clearer, impossibly clear. Samuel could see down through hundreds of feet of water as if it were air. And in that clarity, he saw them. Shapes. Massive. Moving in formation far below. Too large to be whales. Too deliberate to be anything natural. Their forms were indistinct, like looking at something through frosted glass, but Samuel could make out enough to know they were watching the boat. Watching them. Cross had gone pale. Are those... Don't look directly at them, Samuel commanded. Eyes forward. Breathe, normally. We're guests here. Act like it. The shapes circled beneath them for what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they descended back into the darkness. The water's clarity faded, returning to its normal opaque blue. And just like that, the wind returned. The waves resumed their natural rhythm. The Mary Catherine rocked gently, as if waking from a dream. Samuel started the engine. It caught immediately. "We're through," he said. "Through what?" Cross demanded, her voice shaking slightly. "What the hell were those things?" "The Guardians," Marcus said. "Or the Residents. Or something else entirely. We don't know. We've never known." Samuel pointed ahead. The water there looked normal, but he could feel the difference. They'd crossed the threshold. They were in the graveyard now. "This is where your submarines disappeared," he said. "And somewhere in this water, if they're still alive, we'll find them." Cross looked down at the water, then back at Samuel. "And if those things decide they don't want us here?" Samuel's expression was grim. "Then we'll find out if dying in the graveyard is different from dying anywhere else." He pushed the throttle forward. The Mary Catherine responded, cutting through water that looked like any other ocean but felt like something completely foreign. Behind them, normal water. Ahead, the unknown. And somewhere in that unknown, 129 men were waiting, or whatever was left of them. If you want to see more stories that blend the real with the impossible, hit that red subscribe button. It's free, and it tells me you want more journeys into places maps can't reach. The instruments died 2 hours into the graveyard. First the GPS, its screen dissolving into static. Then the radio, emitting a low hum that sounded almost like breathing. The compass spun lazily, pointing nowhere and everywhere at once. Even the depth finder, the one instrument Samuel had trusted his entire life, showed readings that made no sense. One moment it registered 200 feet beneath the keel, the next, 20,000. "We're blind," Cross said, staring at her useless tablet. "No," Samuel corrected. "We're just using different eyes now." He stood at the wheel, his body tense but not panicked. This was what he'd expected, what he'd prepared for. In the graveyard, technology didn't fail because it was broken. It failed because the rules here were different. Magnetic fields twisted, time stretched. The ocean itself seemed to reject anything that tried to measure or understand it. But Samuel wasn't trying to understand it. He was trying to listen to it. The water had taken on a strange quality. The color was wrong. Not quite blue, not quite gray, but something in between that hurt to look at for too long. The waves moved in patterns that defied wind direction. And beneath the surface, Samuel could occasionally glimpse shadows that were too large, too angular to be natural. "There," he said suddenly, cutting the engine back. Marcus grabbed binoculars, scanning the horizon. "I don't see anything. Not on the surface. Below." Samuel pointed to a section of water about 50 yards ahead. To anyone else, it would look identical to the rest of the ocean. But Samuel saw the subtle difference, the way the swells moved around that spot, like water flowing around a stone. Something was there. Something big. "Lieutenant," Samuel said, "you said the last transmission mentioned descending. Where exactly were those submarines when they went silent?" Cross pulled up a waterproof map, marked with coordinates that were now meaningless but still showed relative positions. "The first one was here," she pointed, "about 40 nautical miles northeast of Georges Bank. The second was 10 miles closer to shore. The third," she hesitated, "the third was almost exactly where we are now." A chill ran through Samuel's chest. They were coming toward us, Marcus realized, moving shallower, like they were trying to escape something, or being herded, Samuel thought but didn't say. He maneuvered the Mary Catherine closer to the anomaly in the water. As they approached, the temperature dropped noticeably. Cross's breath became visible in the air. Frost began forming on the metal railings. "That's not natural," she whispered. "Nothing here is natural," Marcus muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. The water directly ahead began to churn, not violently, but purposefully. Bubbles rose from the depths, thousands of them creating a perfect circle on the surface. And then slowly, something began to emerge. Metal, dark and barnacle encrusted. A conning tower. Submarine! Cross shouted, rushing to the rail. Samuel's heart hammered. It was one of them. It had to be. But something was wrong. The metal was too corroded, the barnacles too thick. This sub looked like it had been down here for decades, not weeks. More of the vessel broke the surface. Water cascaded off its hull as it rose higher, impossibly high, as if something beneath was pushing it upward. Samuel could see damage along the side, not from collision or explosion, but deep gouges, the same parallel lines that had marked the Northern Star. "Get ready to board," Cross said, already moving toward the equipment locker. "Wait." Samuel's voice was sharp. "Something's wrong. We have to check for survivors." "Look at it," Samuel commanded. "Really look." Cross stopped. She stared at the submarine. Then Samuel saw understanding dawn in her eyes. The hatches were open, all of them. Water poured from the interior, but there was something else, something dark and viscous like oil, coating the metal around the openings. And in that darkness, shapes moved, not human shapes. "Back away from the rail," Samuel said quietly. Now, they retreated. The submarine continued to rise until it floated fully on the surface, silent and dead. No sounds came from inside, no signs of life, but Samuel knew they were being watched. "The crew," Cross breathed. "Where's the crew?" A sound answered her, a metallic scraping from inside the submarine. Then another, then a chorus of them, like nails on steel, coming from every hatch at once. Marcus grabbed a flare gun. "Samuel, hold," Samuel ordered. His mind was racing. The sub was a trap. Whatever had taken the crew was using the vessel itself to draw them in. But why? What did it want? Then he remembered the words from the last transmission. Something down here. Not, "We found something." Not, "There's something." Something down here. As if the thing doing the transmitting wasn't the crew anymore. "Start the engine," Samuel said. "Slow and steady. We're not running." "We're not?" Marcus's voice was incredulous. "If we run, it'll chase us. I learned that last time." Samuel's hands were steady on the wheel, but his pulse thundered in his ears. "Whatever's in there, it's testing us, seeing if we're prey or something else." The scraping sounds grew louder. Something was moving through the submarine's interior, climbing toward the hatches. Samuel could see movement in the darkness of the nearest opening, something pale and wrong reaching toward the light. Then a voice, human, but distorted, like it was coming through water and static and distance all at once. "Turn back." Cross went rigid. "That's Commander Hastings. He was captain of the USS Hartford, the first submarine that went dark. Please, turn back. Not safe. Not us anymore." The words were broken, desperate. Samuel's throat tightened. The man was still in there, somewhere, still conscious, still aware enough to warn them, still aware of what he'd become. "We can't leave them," Cross said, tears in her eyes. "If there's even a chance." "There's no chance," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for them. Not anymore. The best thing we can do is make sure no one else joins them." More shapes appeared in the hatches now, figures that might have once been men, but were now something else. Their skin had taken on the same pale, translucent quality as deep-sea creatures. Their eyes, if they still had eyes, reflected light like animals. They moved wrong, joints bending in directions that shouldn't be possible. "Turn back while you still can. It's hungry, always hungry." The engine thrummed beneath Samuel's feet. He began backing the Mary Catherine away slowly. The figures at the hatches didn't pursue. They just watched, their borrowed voices echoing across the water. Then the submarine began to sink again, and not gradually, suddenly violently, as if something had grabbed it from below and yanked it down. The water around it boiled. The figures at the hatches didn't cry out or struggle. They just disappeared with the vessel, pulled back into the depths. In seconds, the ocean was calm again. No trace remained except disturbed water that quickly settled. Cross was shaking. What was that? What happened to them? "The graveyard happened," Marcus said quietly. "It took them, changed them, made them into something that belongs here instead of up there." Samuel's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. 129 men, 43 on each submarine. He'd come here hoping to save them. Now he knew the terrible truth. They couldn't be saved. They could only be left behind. But as he turned the Mary Catherine to head back toward the boundary, toward normal water and normal rules, Samuel felt something shift in the ocean beneath them. A presence, massive, ancient, aware. It had let him go once before. It had let them see what happened to those who stayed too long. But as the boat carved through the impossible water of the graveyard, Samuel wondered if that mercy would hold, or if next time, because he knew there would be a next time, there were always people foolish enough to test the deep. The thing below would decide it was tired of letting go. Behind them the water churned once more. Another submarine rose to the surface, this one the USS Columbia, then another, the USS Hartford. All three vessels floating like grave markers, their crews still inside, still calling out warnings in voices that were no longer fully human. Samuel didn't look back. He couldn't. Commander Ashford had asked him to bring them home. But Samuel understood now they were already home, just not a home meant for the living. If this story reached you, if it made you feel something real, leave a comment telling me from which city or country you're watching. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it's how stories like this one keep finding people like you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank